What are you hearing?
Okay, yeah, I forgot it was my turn to guess. I was just sitting here. So,
Oh, yeah.
what am I hearing
Okay.
here?
Do you have clues? If
Wait,
you're
wait, wait!
completely
Don't give me a
stumped.
clue. Don't give me a clue too early. Um, whoop, whoop. Okay, so later on in the episode, we're going to be going to Australia. So I'm feeling like maybe there'll
Uh-huh.
be an Australia connection.
No. I'll
I
give
can
you.
hear
No,
people.
I will give you a clue with the location thing and correct your location sort of mishap. Is you may have heard this frog last month.
Okay, okay, yeah. So I can hear people. Hang on a sec. Okay. Wait a second. Wait a second.
See, looking up third-party resources to help with
No,
frog
no, no,
story.
no, no, no. I feel like someone might have sent me the same frog, but I can't. I'm not gonna look, and I
They
can't remember what it's
definitely.
called.
Well, they might have sent you the same frog. They certainly didn't send you the same file.
So you recorded this yourself.
Aubrey recorded this.
Aubrey recorded this. Big up Aubrey. Shouts to Aubrey. Okay. Is it called like the treehole frog?
It's a treehole frog, man.
Oh, I did it. I did it. I did it. I have to be honest with you though, Ben. I have to be honest with you. I was also sent this same call, and I intended to use it on you next episode by Seb Hoofer. So whether or not that, I mean,
Excellent.
I have knowledge of the call. Whether that qualifies as a point, I didn't look it
I mean,
up.
that's
I
how
couldn't
you would
find
guess
it.
a frog call is having knowledge of the call. Like that's the whole point of the what?
Yeah,
This
I mean,
isn't a guessing
amazing.
game. This is a test of knowledge game. It just happens that we suck at it.
Yeah, wow, man. Well, I feel like you've really thrown me a bone there, but yeah, I did. I remembered it.
Metafrionella sundana.
Wow. I'm I'm chuffed. Okay, I feel like it should be like a half point though because it was sent to me for with the intention of it being used in an episode. But
I
I'll
mean,
take a full point.
if you only want a half point, you can take your half point. I mean, I'm alright with it being
You're
full
happy with
point.
it being a full point? Okay, yeah.
I
I
mean,
also have to be
how else are
honest. I
we going to
didn't.
guess these frogs if you don't have prior knowledge of them?
Yes, yeah. That's. I mean, that's true. That's true. All right, let's stop Froggy now. Thanks, Frog. That was great. Um, wow. Okay, wow. Okay, well that means I'm gonna have to find something new. Um, maybe I'll find something which is like a Bornean species as well for you to give you like a fighting chance in the next one because I feel like that was quite generous. Um,
I mean, yeah, it's just now it's just going to be a heightened embarrassment when I don't get it. That's
well, yeah. I mean, I honestly I don't think there's any embarrassment from not getting frog calls. They are like ludicrously difficult, so don't beat yourself up. Um, all right, so yeah, that's the frog call. I'm Tom Major. He's Ben Marshall. This is the Herpetological Highlights podcast. Let's move on, shall we, to
207.
our 207, 207 episodes. Let's
Yeah.
move on to our paper for today. So, we've got a paper here. It's by Cairncross, Spencer, Meisuria, Crowther, Newsome, 2024. Carrion use by a reptile is influenced by season, habitat, and competition with an apex mammalian scavenger. Published in Ecology and Evolution.
I
So,
thoroughly enjoyed this paper. Just starting off, there was something very engaging with reading about this. There were three species involved. There were lace monitors, dingoes, and red foxes. And there's this competitive scavenger community with all these three species sort of pitted against each other in some way to gain access to delicious kangaroo carcasses. Um, and for some reason, that just painted a really vivid picture in my mind, and it's a really engaging paper because you can just picture this competition as these guys head out looking for their tasty snacks at different times of the day.
yeah, I agree. I really liked it. I think it's helped massively by the fact the paper is like supremely well written and has really
Yep.
nice figures. But yeah, so we're talking about carrion, so dead animals. Carrion obviously is disgusting and smelly to us. Despite that, it's a valuable resource for animals, right? Many species rely heavily on it. It's often a main food source for those species. And this time we're in southeast Australia in the western Blue Mountains in a place called Wolgan Valley. And this is an area, as you've just alluded to, Ben, with a few large scavengers. So we've got the dingo, which is this Australian feral dog, which is now recognised, has been recognised for a long time as its own species, Canis dingo. And it's considered a native species in Australia.
Feral?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like...
That's getting into a debate, isn't it?
I feel like there's quite a big debate about this in Australia, and I don't know. To me, it's an invasive species. It's a dog, but I don't know. It's been there for
dog. Canis dingo.
Canis dingo. That's the thing. Yeah, I mean, it was introduced by humans 4,000 years ago, right? It came over from Southeast Asia, is the belief with humans. And since then, 4,000 years, it's kind of like assimilated its way into the environment. So I think there's like papers and conversation articles about this topic. Whether it's, and I don't know, I hope it's not insensitive in some way to just say that it's a dog. But like the consensus in Australia now, as far as I can tell, seems to be that any ecological damage it was going to wreak has been wrought. And now it's assimilated with the environment. So like, thylacines went extinct partly because of dingoes is the thought, and you know, now they're just this apex predator which is coexisting with everything since 4,000 years ago. So yeah, they call it a
feral
native
in the sense that it was domesticated when it was brought over.
Yeah, but in this paper they refer to it as a native species.
Right, I think that's probably all I'm highlighting is potentially the feral bit might not be right if it's a native species, right? Because then that would suggest that it wasn't domesticated when it was brought over, and it was brought over like with people, but not necessarily.
I see. I don't know about that.
Because feral is a flip back from domestic to wild. Yes.
Right. So yeah, my understanding is it began feral and then became probably
How
invasive
does it begin?
at the
It
time.
must be domesticated to become feral, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I think it was just I think it's a domestic dog that got brought over with people, and then subsequently spread into the wider environment and made a life for itself, and has been undergoing evolution since it arrived in Australia, which is one of the arguments for it being a native species, is that it's changed, apparently genetically and morphologically. To the point of it
being a separate species.
Yeah, although I would argue that a dog changing morphologically is really not a big deal in terms of it being a new species, because, I mean, look at a Chihuahua, look at a Great Dane. They're the same species, but nevertheless, that's different because that's selective breeding. I don't know. It's a quagmire.
Yes, I think that's really that's where we'll end it. Is we don't have an answer here, and we're not going to talk about it any further because we don't know.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it's an interesting topic that people should investigate on their own. Time.
Maybe Mammalogical Musings is the podcast for that. So yeah, there is a more recent introduction, the European red fox, which is considered an invasive species in Australia. So these two mammalian scavengers in Australia are competing with this big lizard, the lace monitor, Varanus varius, which might be Australia's heaviest lizard. It seems to depend who you ask, but it weighs up to 14 kilograms and inhabits a wide variety of habitats, but tends to prefer some tree cover because it's a semi-arboreal species. The parenti is longer as a species, and it might also be heavier too. It really depends on your resource. Scott Iper said that the lace monitor is the heaviest monitor lizard in Australia, and I'm inclined to believe Scott. So
I'm all right with that.
He said it in a Facebook post which I found in my Google searches. So yeah, it's probably the heaviest. Lace monitors, this monitor Varanus varius, they are adaptable and they can hunt for small animals, or they can rely on carrion. It depends on what's available at the time. So they will do whatever is sort of working best for them, but they are known to be big time scavengers, as are dingoes and red foxes, the European red foxes. So you've got, like you said at the start, these kind of three large species which are competing for the resource, which is carrion. And this study took place in an area of Australia which is temperate. So some people, when they think of Australia, they might think of a desert, a sweltering desert, but not always the case. Many parts of Australia are actually temperate. And the goal here was to discover which scavengers get to carcasses first, and also whether or not there is a difference in their activity between different times of day. They thought that having lots of dingoes and red foxes around might reduce the activity of lace monitors, partly just because of direct competition and fear, but also because they'll eat the eggs of juveniles. They'll eat the eggs of lace monitors and the juveniles, which could potentially have an impact on their numbers locally. And dingoes will actually even eat adult lace monitors. They are like
I was going to say that was the kicker, wasn't it? Dingoes are big enough to be able to take an adult lace monitor, whereas foxes potentially not so much.
Yeah, and dingoes have the advantage of working as a team. So yeah, I mean, when they start to put their mind to things, there's a lot they can do. And yeah, in order to test these ideas, you said it, Ben, they put out carcasses of eastern grey kangaroos. So they chucked out a bunch of kangaroos at 20 different sites, half of which were in open habitats, so sort of less trees, and half were closed, more wooded habitats. And they did this in both summer and winter, deploying a total of 80 carcasses. So big effort. Kudos to the authors here. They chucked out 80 different kangaroo carcasses. And once those carcasses were out in the environment, they monitored them using camera traps. So they plonked down a nice little camera, and the cameras were very sensitive. They were set to go off if there was any motion or if anything infrared, so any heat. They had to be really sensitive to detect reptiles, because reptiles don't always have the heat signature that mammals have. It's easy to detect a dingo or a fox because their infrared will pick it up. However, it's much more likely.
Bigger too, so it's going to be bigger in the frame.
Yeah, dingoes are massive. So yeah, they did this big thing, 80 carcasses, camera traps on all of them. So some poor sap had to look at all the camera trap footage and code which animals were seen when, and spare a moment's thought for that person. And then from this, they got the results.
Absolutely, but that's a job that's becoming more and more streamlined, right? With automated detection.
Yeah, I hope it is. Yeah, I hope it is. I hope they don't have to just. I mean, like, they probably see some cool stuff, but after you've seen the first 100 red foxes come into frame, you are just sitting there coding videos. And I guess also they did have the advantage of the videos only being recorded when something was going on. Video I've
yes, depending on the sensitivity and not getting a whole bunch of false positives. Yeah. There's always that risk.
But yeah, so they had all this camera trap footage, and then they coded who turned up when, and whether there were sort of differences in the seasons and the times of day, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, should we talk about what these lace monitors were getting up to?
I think so. Where would you like to start? The sort of seasonal comparison, maybe?
Yeah.
So, seasonally, there was this wonderful contrast with basically lace monitors being, in the summer, really rapid to track down these carcasses and sort of outpacing the efforts of your dingoes and red foxes by quite a lot. But this sort of pace that they had wasn't there in the winter. Like, lace monitor ability to track down carcasses, or willingness or need to, not there.
No, yeah, in the winter the big lizards were much less effective, and they did actually they put forward a few reasons for that, didn't they? Obviously they're reptiles, so when it's cold they're not so effective. They rely on heat from their environment in order to get warm, unlike those foxes and dingoes, which can heat themselves up being mammals. Additionally, in the winter, they suggested the carcasses may also be less smelly, making them harder to find. That's a possibility, maybe not that likely. But it's
possibly likely because the dingo and red foxes also were slower, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
So it is a sort of reduction in general. So
that's fair.
Something universal does tally up there.
Yeah, okay. They also, is there anything else to say about the season? Oh, yeah. So, in the winter, or in general, open habitat carcasses were found sooner. So those in open habitats rather than the sort of wooded habitats were found sooner, which could be due to wind. Basically, just they're more exposed to the wind, so the scent might get spread more effectively. Or it could be that they're more easily spotted in open terrain. If they've got good eyesight, they could actually see the carcasses from further away and then be like, well, there's a carcass there. They also these things kind of might be compounded by the fact that because they're easier to find in open areas, other scavengers might be able to find them more quickly too, which could lead to this increase in motivation. So it's like, oh,
Right.
there's something in an open environment here. This is going to have other animals getting to it quickly. I better put shift on, try and get there so I can get some of this disgusting fetid meat before anyone else.
Yeah, and just to give a little bit of a sort of reference point for people. So in the summer for lace monitors, they were finding carcasses basically within the first 10 days, usually around 6 days in the summer. Switch that to winter, it's double the amount of time. So it's around 21 days to track down the carcass. So it is quite a big difference. The whole open to closed habitat, you're talking sort of like 5.7 days to 6.5 days. So it's not as... the seasonal change seems to be more dramatic than the habitat change, essentially, for the lace monitors.
Right. And I mean, just the idea of finding a carcass after 6 days in the summer is grim.
It's the other thing that they were highlighting is potentially decomposition is happening faster in the summer, so you might need to just get to stuff faster to get the best bits before all your invertebrates chew it up as well. Which I suppose you alluded to with other scavengers, didn't you?
Yeah, I didn't mention invertebrates though, and that is a thing. Like invertebrates will also be more active when it's hotter. So yeah, there's more pressure from that sort of the small competition. So one other thing they were interested in was whether or not there was an influence of activity of these large mammals, these other scavengers, in the activity of the lace monitors finding the carcasses and sort of scavenging them.
Yeah, this competition angle, huh?
Yeah. So interestingly, there was not much influence of red foxes on lace monitor activity, likely due to the fact that lace monitors are diurnal, whereas red foxes are actually mostly nocturnal. So there's probably not that much competition pressure directly, although obviously,
right.
I mean, you know, the foxes
some
are
sort
still
of temporal niche partitioning potentially going on there.
Yeah, so they're active in the day. The foxes only come out at night. So although they're still competing for the same resources, it's not quite so direct. And, you know, they are still putting pressure on each other because at the end of the day, once all the meat's been eaten, the meat's been eaten. It doesn't really matter what time of day it is. But yeah, they didn't seem to have much of an impact, probably because they're not directly competing at the carcass at the same time.
Right. They're just politely waiting.
Yeah, they sort of pass them. You know, it becomes night, maybe it's dusk, the lace monitors are off to bed, and they pass the night shift going by. It's the foxes, and they can smell the stench as well, and they're going to take a little shift eating that horrible meat. So there we go. They also...
But dingoes. Also
the dingoes.
And I don't know, I don't think this is sort of explicitly stated in the paper, but the plot that they have, the sort of time of day plotted out and the activity of the different animals at those different points. It does feel to me like the dingoes almost sort of slotting in between and sort of hitting that crepuscular sort of activity spike. There is a lot more overlap with both the foxes and the lace monitors compared to the quite nice separation of fox at night, lizard at day. Dingoes sort of more active all the way around, but these peaks in your evening and morning, which I thought was quite interesting. And that's, to be honest, more what I expected with the red fox, honestly.
Yep. And they did find that there was an influence of the dingoes on the activity of the lace monitors, right? So if there were a lot of dingoes about, there would be fewer monitor lizards finding carcasses, which makes sense because dingoes can sort of bully the lace monitors. They're also a bit of a threat to them. And so, you know, dingoes should be considered the kind of apex scavenger in this system, and red foxes and lace monitors are sort of more what you'd call a meso scavenger. So like, you know, middle of the food chain, although still relatively high. They're still big animals. But yeah, one thing
wasn't
they do...
massive effect, but it was there. And it also just ties in nicely to the context and what you were talking about before, and the actual competition and the potential threat of dingoes to lace monitors.
Yeah. One thing they did mention, which could, you know, maybe, I guess you could probably take it as you maybe not extend these results to other areas necessarily directly, because they don't know the baseline numbers of any of these scavengers. So they don't they don't know how many lace monitors there are actually kicking around in the environment. Obviously, if there are thousands and thousands of lace monitors, you'd expect lace monitors to be finding the thing more quickly because they're
Right.
more dense. They're just going to bump into it sooner.
It's just pure density of monitor lizards, and they're actually not very good at finding things, and they're not better than dingoes and red foxes. There's just so many of them, they just show up.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, if you had sort of individual ID of them or something like that, maybe you could get an idea. But you're heading towards being able to get numbers of how many there are anyway via that. So yeah, having the abundance would be a big boost.
Yeah. So there we go. Dingoes can bully lace monitors, but lace monitors are still really the dominant scavengers in terms of finding the carcasses during summer.
They certainly seem it. Certainly during the day.
And also, and this is in temperate Southeast Asia, Australia, excuse me. Red foxes are kind of these sneaky nighttime dwellers who sort of keep themselves to themselves, but they do still remove some of the biomass. And so, the fact that they are an invasive species probably is having some kind of impact on lace monitors.
The other thing that they do highlight in their limitations is not knowing how many alternative food sources there are for these scavengers. For, if you imagine something with a very slim dietary sort of width or breadth, it might be forced to use a certain resource most of the time, and then, if it was carcasses, it might have a heightened motivation to get to those carcasses first. But if you had a very wide dietary breadth where the carcass access or acquisition was less important, it could sort of, you wouldn't show up as frequently in the camera traps and things like that, and that might be sort of mediated by how many other resources are around in the environment, both in summer and winter, and how that could change. Because maybe there's just something really delicious for lace monitors in the winter that isn't carcasses.
Could be, yeah, it could be. I think it's probably more likely that they are just feeling slow and only coming out on like the nicest possible days and generally just staying underground, because that's one of the things that makes this species quite adaptable, is they're willing to use burrows for hiding out places, so that sort of alleviates them from needing woodland for cover. But the other thing I wanted to mention about lace monitors is they come in two different color varieties. You've got like the normal variety, which has like it's like a dark color with thin white or yellow bands, but then you've got the Bell's phase lace monitor, which is just like this insanely beautiful lizard which has like big fat white bands on a black band background. It's just probably the coolest looking monitor lizard, I would argue. And if you don't know what one of those looks like, put it into Google.
Put it out there. Lizard. Controversial.
Oh, it's a big statement, isn't it? Such a big statement. I just can't even bandying words like that around. But there's got to be one. So there you go. Lace monitors are meso scavengers in Southeast Australia in this temperate area. Be interesting to see this study. They rule the day. It'd be interesting to see this study repeated in a hotter place, because I reckon it could get too hot for those doggy dingoes, but maybe not for the lace monitors. They can hack it. And really nice paper though. Cool. So there we go. Lace monitors are scavengers. We've got some other business this week, haven't we, Ben?
We do have some other business. So, where would you like to start?
We're sticking with the theme of monitor lizards on this one, and talking about a very, very famous monitor lizard, probably the most famous monitor lizard, Komodo dragons. So this paper came out a little while ago, but this year, 2024, it's by LeBlanc et al. Published, where was it? In Ecology and Evolution, and it was all about it's broadly about monitor lizards, but it's about Komodo dragons' teeth. So as it turns out,
they look at a lot of teeth, to be fair. Like, I know it's centered on Komodo dragons, but they're looking at crocodilian teeth and all sorts. It's got a lot more going for it than just the Komodo dragon stuff, even if that's what we're probably going to focus on here.
And they even mention dinosaurs in it, which is pretty crazy. You don't often see the intersection between lizards and dinosaurs and archosaurs, the big crocodilians, which was cool.
Maybe.
So Komodo dragons, as it turns out, they have teeth reinforced with iron. So we already knew that other animals incorporated iron into the enamel on their teeth. So we knew this for beavers, shrews, some fish, and salamanders. But it is different in Komodo dragons because normally the iron is kind of distributed all around the enamel of the tooth,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why beavers have these like disgusting orange teeth. They don't look very nice. But in Komodo dragons, it's concentrated on the serrated cutting edges of the teeth. So they have this like line of orange on the teeth, which is basically hard because it has incorporated some iron in there. And the authors of this paper were actually able to determine that that serrated edge is more resistant to wear than the surrounding tooth, so it may stay sharp.
Yeah.
So monitor lizards have what's called zyphodont teeth, which are like, they have this serrated cutting blade and they're very sharp. And they basically use this method where they sort of grab and then rip in order to get meat off their prey. And yeah, this serrated edge is actually more resistant to wear than the surrounding tooth, which is pretty cool. So that actually has a function. And
It wasn't
might
popping up in
help
all
it stay
monitor
sharp.
lizards, though, right?
No.
It was
So
a whole heap, but not all of them. I think smaller island-dwelling ones were less likely to have it, if I remember correctly.
so the ones they noticed it in, and they haven't actually tested, they've just looked to see if there's the colour, and they have got it.
Right.
So they haven't looked, I don't think, to check the iron. But yeah, it was like some of the big ones. So the Parenti that we were just talking about, the other Australian giant one, various. So the lace monitor appears not to have it. Oh, maybe occasionally, maybe they're not sure.
Occasionally.
Yeah, not sure what that means exactly, but yeah, they're not like, they don't have it definitely. But also ones that do have it are the Asian water monitor and the crocodile monitor. So kind of these big giant monitor lizards seem to have this iron on the serrated cutting edges of their teeth. And you mentioned that other some crocodilians have it. So
Right.
alligators and other crocodilians also appear to have it, and it similarly appears to be concentrated along the cutting edges, although in crocodilians they don't have the same serrations that monitor lizards have. They just have like a slicing blade. It's like more like a knife, and they're not but they do have the iron sort of accumulated along the edges, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It seems crazy to me that we're only just finding this out about monitor lizards and crocodilians collectively. How did they manage to keep that quiet?
They're just there doing their own thing. I mean, no one asked.
No one asked. Yeah, no one looked. But there you go. Really cool paper. And yeah, like I say, there's just some stuff about dinosaurs and all sorts in there if you want to go read it.
Yes. Yeah, they sort of comparing some fossils and things, but that's a little bit beyond us.
Yeah.
Main takeaway is monitors, crocs have iron reinforced teeth in places.
Yeah. And despite the fact that monitor lizards, they shed their teeth really frequently, but they still experience wear. So for the short time they have their teeth, this iron sequestered and put into the little serrated edges is probably extremely handy. Cool.
Yeah.
So then, staying on the theme of crocodilians, there was a video on, and I think it popped up on my newsfeed somewhere, which I watched, of a crocodile in Australia, and it appears, well, it's being fed by humans from a boat, essentially. They've got a piece of chicken tied on a piece of string, and they are waving it around in front of this crocodile. And then this other, larger saltwater crocodile comes along, I think they're both saltwater crocodiles, comes along and bites off the first crocodile's leg while it was distracted by the people in the boat feeding it chicken. So the comments on this video were like absolutely inane, unbelievable. Really shouldn't have read them. Wouldn't do that again. People being like, yeah.
The real question is, why did you read them?
I don't know why I read them, but people are being like, yeah, it's not because they're feeding it, it's because it's in its territory. It's like, what are you on about? Obviously, it's just, like, at the very least, it's distracted by the boat. And I think, you know, we did a paper quite recently where agonistic, so violent encounters between sea turtles, which you'd think of as like pretty chill, benign creatures, were magnified in the presence of tourist boats who are feeding them squid. So there is this kind of precedent that large reptiles are potentially more aggressive where there are like artificial food sources around, because, you know, you create this like nucleus of competition where they have something very, very finite and very localized in order to compete.
Potentially as well.
Yeah.
You know, get it now before it's gone.
Exactly. How many chickens have they got to tie to the string? So yeah, right. I mean, I just saw this video and I thought it was worth mentioning. Like, I don't know, it seems crazy to me that we're feeding wild crocodiles, especially when you see stuff like this. I mean, like, you know.
I suppose the other reason that it might have occurred is sort of like a prey misdirect thing, right? There's a scent of chicken everywhere, bit of movement, put two and two together, bite onto wrong thing. You know.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, but regardless, I mean, the crocodile eats the other crocodile's leg. That's not going to grow back. They can grow their tails back a little bit, can't they? But can saltwater crocs? I can't remember. I know alligators can. But yeah, they're not going to grow back a leg. So that crocodile is now without a leg permanently. And yeah, it's because people deign to feed them, which, yeah, just doesn't really make sense to me. You don't feed other animals. I don't know why it's okay with crocodiles, quite frankly. But there you go.
Well, I would probably posit that it isn't.
Yeah. But there you go. Yeah, pretty sad video, but like just interesting. And I wonder if there'll be. I would love to see some. I mean, I guess you'd have to keep feeding the crocodiles, but it would be interesting to see if there were studies suggesting that they were more aggressive in the presence of artificial food. Which, I mean, if you're bringing large saltwater crocodiles together, they're not the friendliest of beasts to each other. So I could see that being an issue.
I can't imagine it's going to be all sharing and caring.
No, not really about that. But yeah, so I think that concludes our episode about Australian scavengers. I got a frog call right, which is absolutely crazy. I don't think I'm ever going to recover from that.
Mark this day down. Mark this episode 207. The treehole frog.
The treehole frog. Borneo. And again, yeah, thanks Seb for sending the treehole frog. So it was familiar in my mind. Remarkable. Cool. So yeah, I think if you want to get in touch with us, if we want to correct something that we've said, or if you want to just ask us a question, whatever it might be, herphighlights@gmail.com. You can become a Patreon at patreon.com/herphighlights. Massive thanks as always to our patrons. You can follow us on Instagram, herp_highlights, and I'm also on Instagram at tom_e_major. All that remains to be said is thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.